Okay, let's talk about books here that I'm not really sure about in the Bible. The first one is 2nd Peter. The reason I'm not so sure about that is because a lot of the biblical experts and stuff say that 2nd Peter, it's hard to tell if 2nd Peter was really even written by Peter, and a lot of people believe that it wasn't. Second one is Revelation, for a very similar reason. It's more of a maybe for me. I can't just put my hand down and say Revelation for sure is bullshit, because there seems to be a lot of mystical truth in it. But second one, Revelation. Mark. I'm not sure about this, once again, because for the same reason as these two. Now, Matthew, this is where things get a little bit interesting, because basically what Matthew is, it seems to be like a copy-paste of different traditions in the Bible that have kind of just been glued together and put into a book, and it's sort of, I don't know, it's kind of like a Frankenstein book, sort of. That's why I'm really not that sure about Matthew. Now, when we go over to Joshua and Leviticus, as far as Joshua is concerned, the reason why I am kind of skeptical about that is because it paints the Israelites as this really powerful, force that went in and just slaughtered its enemies and ruthlessly, declared their land in the name of the Lord, despite the fact that when you read Judges, you get the complete opposite, where it's basically just a small amount of basically people, which reflects what history tells us a little more, and that they kind of were a small people with very little authority, which makes a little bit more sense. Joshua completely contradicts everything we know about history. It paints the Israelites as some fucking, military force, and we know that from history that's probably not what they were. Leviticus, one of the biggest problems that I have with Leviticus is is that the book is filled with nothing but a bunch of orthodox, like Jewish traditions and stuff, and it's mostly about sacrifices. The book of Leviticus is highly focused on sacrifice and stuff, which is the complete opposite of the God that we hear about in Deuteronomy. The God we hear about in Deuteronomy is all about forgiveness and, treat your neighbor as yourself, and, and a lot of these books that say that God never even asked for a sacrifice, that it's all a bunch of Jewish bullshit. There's books in the Bible that say that, which is why Leviticus, I really don't know what to think about it. Genesis can be read in a number of ways, but I don't really think it's the oldest book in the Bible. I'm not saying that Genesis should necessarily be taken out, but Genesis, it's sort of, it can be interpreted in a very ignorant, sort of primitive way, and I think there's better ways you can look at Genesis. In other words, I think Genesis is a book that can kind of be improved upon by understanding it in a different way that reflects not only what we know about mysticism, but also about science. In Genesis, it's not a terrible book, but it's not like some kind of thing that existed from the beginning. It's more like part of the Jewish oral tradition, but it's better than the others, because rather than, I think, constantly focusing on sacrifices and stuff, there's some good things in Genesis, like the fact that humans are frugivorous, herbivorous creatures. Exodus and Numbers. These are, once again, part of the Jewish oral tradition, unlike Deuteronomy and Judges. and I'm really not sure what to think about them, because a lot of it, has to do with the sacrifices and not knowing who wrote them, and Moses isn't talking, about himself in first person. It's somebody else mentioning Moses. So these are some books that really we need to think about whether or not they even belong in the Bible. More so things like, 2 Peter, Leviticus, and Joshua, which really kind of paint this picture of the Israelites that not only is unrealistic, but also paints God as like a monster. Whereas in books like Deuteronomy and Judges and books that might have actually been written by Jesus teach that God is this mystical force of energy that's all loving and all pervasive, and not that sin is okay, but that we can learn from it instead of it being looked at as something that needs to be paid for.